They went through the wall of Scrooge's room and stood on an open country road. It was green everywhere. The city was not there now. The dark and the fog were not there. It was a lovely, cold winter day with snow on the ground. Scrooge looked round with wide eyes. He said, I was born here. I was a boy here. Do you remember the way? Asked the ghost. Remember it? Cried Scrooge. I can close my eyes and walk there. Then why did you forget it for so many years? Said the ghost. Let's go. They walked down the road. Scrooge knew every tree. Then they saw a little town with its bridge, its church, and the river. Scrooge saw some boys on horses. They called to other boys. They all shouted happily. People laughed when they heard them. These are ghosts from the past, said the ghost of past Christmases. They can't see us. But Scrooge and the ghost were happy to see the children, and Scrooge knew every ghost. These people said, Merry Christmas to their friends. Then they said, Goodbye, and went home. They were at school, said the ghost, and there is one child at the school now, when the other children are at home. A child without any friends. Yes, said Scrooge, I know, and he began to cry. They walked again. Scrooge knew the street well. Then they stopped when they came to a large red house. There was nobody there. A rich man built the house, but then he lost all his money. There weren't any doors or windows in the house now. Scrooge and the ghost went into the house. They saw a long, ugly room with desks in it. A boy sat at one of the desks and read. Scrooge sat down next to the boy. It was young Scrooge. He cried when he saw his past. The boy read, and Scrooge watched. He knew the book well. "Oh, it's Ali Baba!" he cried. "Dear old Ali Baba! Yes, I remember." One Christmas time, when his mother and father weren't at home, Ali Baba came to him in his storybook. Ah, yes, and other people from stories. Robinson Crusoe ran by the sea with Man Friday. "Sad, sad boy," said Scrooge. "I want to give... Oh, but it's too late now." "What do you mean?" asked the ghost. "Nothing," said Scrooge. "Nothing. There was a boy at my door last night. He sang a Christmas carol for me, but I didn't give him any money, and I can't do it now." The ghost smiled. "Let's see another Christmas," it said. The schoolroom was darker now. There was young Scrooge at his desk when the other boys were on holiday. Then he stopped reading and started walking sadly up and down the room. The door opened, and a little girl came in. She was younger than the boy. She put her arms round him. Then she said, "Dear, dear brother, I am here because you can come home now." "Home, little Fan?" said the boy. "Yes," said the child happily. "Home for always. Father is kinder now. He spoke kindly to me one night before I went to bed. Then I was not afraid. I asked him again, "Can Ebenezer come home?" "What did he say?" asked the boy, young Scrooge. "What did father say?" "He said, yes. And he sent me, and I'm bringing you home. We'll be a family this Christmas, and we'll have the happiest time in the world." "You are a good woman, little Fan," said Ebenezer Scrooge. She laughed, and tried to put her hand up to his face, but she was too small, and she couldn't do it. So she laughed again. "Dear little Fan," said Scrooge the man. She was very small, and not very strong. "Very small," said the ghost, "but very kind too. She died when she was a young woman. She had children, I think." "One child," said Scrooge. "Yes, one child," said the ghost. "His name is Fred." "Yes," said Scrooge quietly. "Fan's boy, Fred." They left the school and walked outside again. Scrooge looked round. They were now in a busy street in the city. The ghost stopped at the door of a big office. "Do you know this place?" it asked. "Know it?" said Scrooge. "Yes, I started work here." They went in. An old man sat behind a high desk. "It's old Fezziwig, the dear old man. It's Fezziwig, and he isn't dead now." Old Fezziwig put down his pen and looked up at the clock. It was 7 o'clock. He laughed and called merrily, "Ho there, Ebenezer, Dick!" Scrooge, in his past life, now a young man, came in. With him was the other clerk, Dick. "Dick Wilkins," said Scrooge to the ghost. "Yes, there he is. He was a great friend, old Dick." "Come, my boys," said Fezziwig. "Stop work now. It's Christmas Eve. Let's shut the office and put the desks and chairs by the wall. Let's have a party." They pushed the desks and chairs to the wall. They lit more candles and put more coal on the fire. Mrs. Fezziwig came in with the 3 lovely Miss Fezziwigs, and behind the Miss Fezziwigs came 3 young men. Each man was, of course, in love with one Miss Fezziwig. Then more young men and women came in. They worked in the office. There was music, and the dancing began. There was cake and meat and wine. The party finished at 11 o'clock. Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig stood at the door and said goodbye to everybody. "Merry Christmas," they called. "Merry Christmas." Scrooge watched his past life. He remembered everything and enjoyed everything. He was very excited. The young Ebenezer Scrooge was, he thought, a very nice young man. Now, at the end of the party, he remembered the ghost. The ghost looked at him. The light on its head shone yellow. "The party was a small thing," said the ghost, "but it made those unimportant people very happy." "A small thing?" said Scrooge. "No!" "Listen to the 2 young men," the ghost said. The 2 young men stood outside Fezziwig's office in the dark and talked about Fezziwig. One of them said, "He's a fine man." "Was Fezziwig really wonderful?" the ghost asked Scrooge. What do you think? The party cost a little money, not much. Oh, no, it was more important than that, said Scrooge. Fezziwig could make us happy or unhappy. He could make our work light or heavy. He could make our lives good or bad with a word or with a look. He made us happy in small ways and with small things, but with a lot of small things. You can't buy those small things, not with all the money in the world. The ghost looked hard at him, and he stopped. What is it? Asked the ghost. Scrooge said nothing for a minute. And then he said, I want to say a word or two to Dick Wilkins. But Dick Wilkins said good-bye to his friend, the younger Scrooge, and went home. Scrooge and the ghost stood outside the office in the dark. My time here is nearly at an end, said the ghost. Quickly! Again, Scrooge saw Ebenezer Scrooge in the past. But he was older now. He was very different. His eyes said, Where's the money? Where's the money? Money was his life now. Scrooge sat with a young girl. The girl cried, and Scrooge watched her. No, said the girl quietly. You have a new love now. I hope you will be happy with your new love in the future. What love? He asked her. The love of money. You are a different man now, because you have the love of money in your life. He wanted to speak, but she didn't look at him. She said, I am leaving now. I hope you and your money will be happy. And she left. Ghost! Cried Scrooge. Don't show me more. Take me home. But the ghost said, You have to see in your past one more time, Ebenezer Scrooge. They were in another place, a small but beautiful room. Near the fire there was a lovely young girl, and opposite her sat her mother. The mother was the woman from Scrooge's past. He loved her, and then lost her. There was a great noise in the room. There were a lot of very happy, very noisy children. The mother and daughter looked happy too. Then the door opened, and the father came in. He had Christmas boxes in his arms. Everybody opened a box and shouted happily. Later, the younger children climbed up the stairs to the top of the house and went to bed. The man sat down by the fire with his daughter and her mother. The husband turned to his wife with a smile. I saw your old friend this afternoon. Which old friend? Who do you think? I don't know. And then she asked, Was it Ebenezer Scrooge? Yes, he said. It was Mr. Scrooge. I looked in his office window. I saw him by the light of a candle. Mr. Marley is dying, I hear. And there Scrooge sat, without a friend in the world. Ghost! Cried Scrooge sadly. Take me home. These are the ghosts of your past, said the ghost. They are your life. What did you do with your life? Leave me. Take me home. Scrooge took the ghost's hat and put it on the ghost's head. The light went out. Scrooge was in his bedroom at home again. He went to bed and cried. He only stopped crying when sleep came. Chapter 3. The Ghost of Christmas Now. Scrooge woke up and sat up in bed. He heard the church clock. Yes, it was time for the second ghost. It was 1 o'clock. He wanted to see the ghost when it arrived. He didn't want it to come up behind him. But there wasn't a ghost in the room. He waited. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. Then, from his bed, he saw a red light in the next room. What was it? He got up and put on his shoes. Then he went to the door. When he opened the door, somebody or something called him by his name. He looked into the room. It was his room, but very different. The walls had green holly on them. There was a big fire, and on the floor was lovely Christmas food. A Christmas goose, fruit, cakes, bottles of wine. "Come in," said the ghost. "Come in. Look, here I am." Scrooge went into the room and stood in front of the ghost. This was not the hard Scrooge from the past. He could not look the ghost in the eye. He looked at the floor. "I am the ghost of Christmas now," said the ghost. "Look at me." Scrooge looked. He saw a fat, merry person in a long green coat. It had no shoes on its feet, but it had holly on its head in its long brown hair. "I'm different from everybody in your life," said the ghost. "Oh, yes," said Scrooge. "Ghost, take me with you. Last night I went with the other ghost and I learned a lesson. Tonight you can teach me, and I will learn. Give me your hand." The Christmas goose, fruit, cakes, and bottles of wine weren't there now. The room and the fire weren't there. Scrooge and the ghost of Christmas now were in a city street. It was Christmas morning. There was snow in the road in front of the houses. The sky was grey, but the people were happy. They were outside their houses in the snow. They shouted merrily and threw snowballs. They laughed when a snowball hit them. Then the people stopped playing in the snow and listened to the church clock. Time for church. Everybody went inside, but they were quickly out in the street again in their best clothes, with happy faces. These people couldn't see Scrooge and the ghost. Scrooge and the ghost walked a long way through the streets to the house of Bob Cratchit, Scrooge's clerk. Inside the house was Mrs. Cratchit in her best clothes. She made dinner, and Belinda, her daughter, helped her. Peter Cratchit, her son, watched some food on the fire, and two smaller Cratchits, a boy and a girl, danced round and round the table. "Where's your father?" asked Mrs. Cratchit. "And where's your brother, Tiny Tim?" Tiny Tim was the youngest child. He was very small for his age. "And where's Martha?" asked Mrs. Cratchit. "She wasn't as late as this last Christmas." "Here I am, Mother," said a girl. She came in through the door. "Here's Martha, Mother," cried the two young Cratchits. "Martha, you're very late," said Mrs. Cratchit. She smiled at her oldest daughter and took her hat and coat. "We had to do a lot of work in the shop last night," answered the girl, "and we had to finish it this morning." "Well, all right, you're here now," said Mrs. Cratchit. "Sit down by the fire and get warm." The two young Cratchits ran and played. "Father's coming," called one of them. "Stand behind the door, Martha, so father can't see you." So Martha stood behind the door. Then Bob Cratchit, her father, came in. His clothes were old, but very clean. Bob had Tiny Tim on his back. Tiny Tim could not walk without help. "Where's our Martha?" said Bob Cratchit. He looked round the room. "She isn't coming," said Mrs. Cratchit. "She isn't coming?" said Bob Cratchit. "She isn't coming on Christmas Day?" Martha could not stay behind the door now. She didn't want him to be unhappy, not for a minute. So she ran to him and put her arms round him. The two young Cratchits took Tiny Tim away. They watched the dinner on the kitchen fire. "How was Tiny Tim in church?" asked Mrs. Cratchit. "He was very good," said Bob. "I think that he's a little stronger." Tiny Tim's brother and sister helped Tiny Tim to his little chair by the fire. Bob Cratchit put some fruit in the wine and made a wonderful Christmas drink. He put it down by the fire. When the dinner was ready, Bob Cratchit put Tiny Tim in his little chair near him at the table. Then Mrs. Cratchit brought in the goose, and the family watched with open eyes. The family ate it, all of it. Bob Cratchit said, "That's the best goose in the world." Everybody said, "Yes, it's the best goose in the world." It was really not a very big goose, but nobody said that, and nobody thought it. The Cratchits had very little money, and for them the goose was wonderful. After dinner, the family sat round the fire and enjoyed Bob Cratchit's drink, the hot wine with fruit in it. Bob Cratchit stood up and said, "Let's drink to a Merry Christmas to us all. Merry Christmas." And everybody said, "A Merry Christmas to us all." "Merry Christmas," said Tiny Tim. He sat very close to his father on his little chair, and Bob Cratchit put his hand over his tiny one. He loved the child and wanted him near him, but he was afraid. The boy was very ill. "Ghost," said Scrooge, "please tell me something. Will Tiny Tim live?" "I can see Tiny Tim's chair," answered the ghost. "It is near the fire. Nobody is sitting on it. These are only ghosts of the future. They are possible, only possible. But in this future, the child will die." "No, no," said Scrooge. "Oh, no, kind ghost, say that he will live." "In this future, the ghost of future Christmases will not find him here." "But is that important? You often say there are too many people in the world."